Hello, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Cheryl, and we're the co-chairs of the Simsbury Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Housing. Today's episode is an excerpt from the Pathways to Affordable Housing in Simsbury, an educational program we sponsored in November of 2022.
This episode features LeAnn Hanfiled from Beacan Communities. Beacan Communities creates communities that serve a diverse cross-section of society. They have an interesting model. They've developed nearly 150 communities in 11 states in the District of Columbia with the goal of enabling their residents to stay housed, be healthy, age in place, and thrive.
So let's get right to LeAnn's presentation.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for having me. My name is LeAnn Hanfiled. I'm from Beacan Communities. We are a Boston-based developer. I have a couple of slides here just to give you some background on Beacan, call it a shameless plug. Beacan Communities is an owner, operator, and developer of primarily affordable housing. We own and operate over 17,000 units across 150 different properties. We operate in 13 states, and we have over 700 employees. And we've been doing this for more than 50 years. I have not personally, but other people in my organization have been. And then to zoom in a little bit for you guys, just because we are in Connecticut, this is a snapshot of our Connecticut footprint. So we have 330 apartment homes in development right now as we speak. We already own and operate 1,500 apartment homes in Connecticut, and we have another 885 apartment homes under third-party management. And you can see sort of the towns there on the map that we are active in. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea that where we are and the work that we're doing. So tonight I am going to cover three different buckets. I'm going to talk a little bit about marketplace perspectives today that we see. I'm also going to touch on benefits of diverse housing options and price points. And I'm going to close on misunderstandings around affordable housing. So we will start with marketplace perspectives and a fun one, financing. If anyone's read a newspaper or seen a commercial or been to a bank or tried to get a mortgage, everyone knows that interest rates are out of control. They're off the charts. And that is true for developers, just like it is for any other individual. It just means that you can't borrow as much money, which means you don't have as much money to build your housing. In traditional market rate developments, right, the capital stack is pretty simple. It's traditional equity, it's conventional debt. And you build your housing and the market rents support a bigger mortgage. In affordable housing, that's not how it works, right? Affordable housing caps rents at a restricted amount, so you can only support so much debt. The cost to build affordable housing is the same to build any other housing. They all cost the same and they're all very expensive. So when we see financing today in the condition it's in these rising interest rates, it just has an adverse impact, and it means that we need more subsidy to build these, to produce new units. And then also, so under financing, we would need more capital, more subsidy, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. I have some examples of some capital stacks to show you. In the opportunities bucket, I put local support. And when I talk about local support, that's really two things. It's financial. Again, when we talk about capital stacks, there is often a need for financial support from the municipality, from the town that you're working in, because it takes so much to build. Local support can come in the form of home dollars, ARPA. There's a lot of ARPA money floating out there now, tax abatements, forgiveness on building permit fees. There's a lot of different vehicles that towns and municipalities can employ to try and support these affordable housing developments. And the other thing is just citizen local support, right? It takes, in order to build in any town, in any community, you need the citizen support to be there. That also ties into some of our barriers. The cost of production, which I talked about a little bit on the financing, but the cost of production is also incredibly high right now. The contractor doesn't give us a break because it's affordable housing. Again, it costs just as much. The availability of sites, that's always a big one. Both the availability of sites just from a land standpoint, as Matt mentioned, it's a finite resource, and also the price of the availability of sites. Again, the cost of affordable housing is so high and the rents are capped that the higher the price of the land, the harder it is to build that capital stack. And finally, zoning, and that's a big one, and Matt touched on this one a little bit too. Zoning is not a given, and that also plays into the risk for the affordable housing developers, right? So Matt talked about going into a town. 830G is a tool that we have that, in theory, promotes affordable housing. But again, developers have to spend money up front to put sites under agreement, to have drawings done, have plans, engage architects. And then if you go into a town and you can't get a variance or a special permit, you ultimately are assuming a lot of risk for a deal that may or may not go forward. So those are really the big three barriers that, again, we see time and time again. It's kind of a theme. And that transcends all towns. That's not unique to Simsbury. Diverse housing options. So I'm going to start with housing costs. So housing is usually the largest expense in a family budget. And so the higher the housing costs, which we've heard a little bit about tonight, the more that budget is strained. A household is defined as cost burden if it pays more than 30% of its income towards housing. The more cost burdened, the less money that it can spend, that household can spend on other things. So the introduction of diverse housing options, including affordable housing, which is what we're sort of focused on tonight, means that families have more discretionary income to put into other things, like the local economy. Research shows, and you can Google it, you don't have to take my word for it, that residents of inclusive communities are often more innovative, entrepreneurial, and economically competitive. And that means people are naturally motivated and want to do better if they feel welcomed and supported in the communities that they're in. That's not really a new concept, right? Think about the kickball team in second grade. If you are picked last to play on that kickball team, you're probably less likely to come back out tomorrow. So creating these environments, so meeting people where they're at in life, and fostering these diverse neighborhoods, they're associated with stronger economic drivers, including increased job opportunities, and you probably can guess it, higher homeownership rates. And that's the goal, in theory, maybe for some, maybe not for all. But we're talking about creating a system that helps the individual get to the next step. And then last but not least, affordable housing for families. And this is an interesting one. In the affordable housing world, that means non-age restricted housing. Affordable housing for seniors is often popular and associated with affordable housing because I think people understand it more. We associate retirees with limited income, so affordable housing makes sense. They maybe don't need a big house anymore. Again, it's just a logical perception. But I think that we don't often think about families off the bat. And as Kylie mentioned, a lot of the multifamily properties in the state of Connecticut are 1 and 2 bedroom properties, right? And those actually do work for families, right? You can talk about small families, young couples, maybe a mom with a young baby or a couple with a young baby. Again, those 1 and 2 bedrooms do actually work for the broadest range of persons. They can work for retirees or senior housing. It just, when the reverse happens, when you restrict a property for seniors, it can't serve families. It's also worth mentioning, as we're talking about housing here in Simsbury, that state policy right now isn't aligned with senior housing. And that's not to say that there aren't senior affordable housing projects. There certainly are. A lot of them are existing housing and they're rehabs. But certainly the new production of affordable housing is really geared towards family housing in the state of Connecticut. So price points. So we started by talking about diverse housing options in the context of housing costs and how we have to make the housing affordable to meet people at different stages in their life. So what does it mean when we say affordable? So affordable housing establishes limits on how much can be charged for a unit based on a household's income. This is a snapshot of Hartford County. That's the MSA that Simsbury also fits into. And you can see here on the slide, back. So you can see on this slide that there are income and rents established for this area, and a single person in Simsbury or in Hartford County that was making $47,000 a year would have to pay almost $1,200 for a studio apartment. That's not no money, right? That's a reasonable and a real rent that someone would have to pay. And you can go down the list, right? A 2-bedroom would cost nearly $1,600 a month. I think it's at $1,522. And again, this is just at 60% of the area median income. So that's a pretty common affordable income tier that we see a lot in affordable deals. And so keep in mind that as we talk about these caps and these limits, you're regulating the housing cost to 30% of that household's income. And that means that you're preserving that bucket of income that they have to pay for other things, like the local economy, right? Like emergency funds, like producing a savings account that would go to a down payment down the line, right? So there's a lot of reasons to support this sort of 30% restriction, if you will, depending on a person's income. So this is pulled from Google, so it's very official. And no, but seriously, if you were looking for an apartment in Simsbury, right, this is where you would go first, right? And you would pull up Google and say, what's out there? And this is what comes up. This is a listing for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath in Simsbury. And you can see that it's $2,100 a month. And if my little calculation on the side over here. So that means that an individual that would rent that unit would be paying almost over $25,000 a year to rent that 1-bedroom in Simsbury, Connecticut. On the last slide, we saw that an individual making 60% of the area median income would only make $47,000 a year, which translates to them paying over half of their income for an apartment. That's a big portion of their income, and that means they don't have little money to cover other bills, to pay for things like savings accounts, to pay for education, or to buy dinner in town, right? They can't do all those things if they're so cost burdened like you would see here. And then we're going to transition into some misunderstandings, and Kylie touched on some of these, so I'm happy to keep that theme going a little bit. Who lives in affordable housing? So again, we talked about the price points and maybe the income tiers that live in affordable housing, but this is really a snapshot of who lives there, right? Your children, your grandchildren, as they start their careers, young professionals, town employees, teachers, firefighters, police and town staff. These are some local businesses that we are familiar with just from some other projects that we've worked with. But again, we have residents in our buildings that work in these places, right? So this is just, a snapshot of who might live there. And the other thing I think that's worth mentioning that I think is a big misconception in affordable housing is that similar to other multifamily properties, market rate developments, there are occupancy requirements, right? They have background checks, they have credit checks, they have to provide proof of income, and that's true at any housing development. So the same is true for affordable housing. There are those requirements as you move in as well. So I put this slide up to show you a couple things. This is Montgomery Mill. This is a deal that Beacan did in 2020. We finished. It's an adaptive reuse, which is actually one of my favorites because they create some really fun new units. They're like old brick and industrial in the inside. It's just a personal preference, but I think they're fun. But a couple things. One, to show you the capital stack that I talked about earlier. And you can see it on the bottom of the slide there. And that's a long list, right? There's tax credits, and there's Urban Act funds, and there's brownfields loans, and there's Department of Housing soft debt, and state historic tax credits. And there's a TIF from the city. And then there's also conventional debt as well. But again, it's a much bigger stack than you would see in any other sort of development. So I just put that up there to show you that it takes a lot to make these deals possible, because affordable housing, again, costs just as much as any other market rate development. So I put that up there, and I also put this up there to talk a little bit about quality, and Kylie touched on this as well, that I think there is a big misunderstanding about the quality of affordable housing. So I put these up as well, some imagery for you to show you about, in these pictures, you can see finishes and the amenities that are in our buildings. I think at least 3 of these are in Windsor locks. And so again, you can see that affordable housing really can be attractive and have all the amenities of a market rate property. You can see a unit interior here. We also have tenant lounges, fitness rooms, computer learning centers, business labs for residents to use. So again, these all sort of factor into this, I think, misconception that affordable housing can't be attractive. And quality, by the way, is a measurable standard, right? When you're considering affordable housing and who the proponent is and who's putting it forward, you can evaluate the developer or the applicant, right? And developers, do they have a website? Do they have a resume? Have they done this before? What's their track record? Is this in their wheelhouse? I think those are all really fair questions that can help you understand what you're getting. This is another good snapshot, I think, again, to just piggyback on the who lives in affordable housing in terms of price points. This is a snapshot of the actual resident population that lives in Montgomery Mill. These are real people who live there. A resident physician, a school principal, an RN, a teacher, right? A bank teller. So again, this just gives you an idea of the people that we're talking about that live in these units, that live in these properties. And again, the misconceptions that it's people who don't work or don't have jobs or maybe aren't supporting the local economy. Again, we see time and time again that that's just not the case. This is another deal I threw up. It's another one of our deals is actually in pre-development right down the road. I think some people in the room maybe are helping us. This is the homes at Avon Park. And it's kind of a fun one. It's a combination of adaptive reuse and new construction, mixed income housing. And here again, you can see that quality is a driver and it's a factor in what we do, that affordable housing really can be inviting and attractive and create like a sense of place in a community within a larger community. So that's just another example for you to see as well. I think that's the end. It is.
One of the things that was interesting in LeAnn's presentation was that diverse housing options, which include affordable housing, can mean families have more discretionary income, which is available to be spent in the local economy.
It was so interesting to see LeAnn discuss the price points and income levels and the household income and what's deemed affordable. We have a number of apartment complexes in Simsbury, and they have been the subject of some controversy. People think they might be affordable, but they are actually not affordable. They exceed the rent level, which would qualify for 60% of the area median income. For instance, the Ridge at Talcott Mountain has 299 units, none of which are affordable. And that's a policy decision that we should be discussing as a town. What do affordable housing communities actually look like? You're seeing the Montgomery Mills in Windsor Locks and the homes at Avon Park. These are two very successful communities that are now being developed.
I thought it was interesting too, who lives in affordable housing in Connecticut? When LeAnn shared one specific profile of the residents of one of the existing units, there we had a pilot, a resident physician, a sonographer, staff accountant, service technician, bank teller, teacher, executive assistant, people who had disabilities, and people that are retired.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for watching this episode of Let's Talk, sponsored by the Simsbury DEI Council. We hope this review of our housing educational series has been helpful. As more affordable housing issues come before the town, it's important that residents are informed.
Thanks again, and we'll see you
see you
around town.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.